Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Miami Foundation's Public Space Challenge webinar. Can we get an idea if you all can hear us? It seems like our sound is not working. Okay, sound is not working.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
All righty. So it seems like maybe we do have audio now. Great. Well, welcome again to the Miami Foundation's Public Space Challenge webinar. We will do a few things through this session. We're going to start by understanding the who, the what, and the why of the Public Space Challenge. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into the specifics of this year's challenge and talk about the submission process. But we'll be sure to leave plenty of time for your questions, anything else that we want to talk about. Very quickly, before we get started, a couple of housekeeping notes. There is a chat box probably on the right of your screen, and we would love it if you would ask questions. You could ask questions throughout the entire session, and we'll get to them. Some of them will call out audibly as we're talking, but we'll be able to answer questions as we go, so feel free to jump in at any point. Alrighty, so we are just getting started with the presentation. It should be up on your screen at this point. So we will first of all talk about the who of behind the Public Space Challenge. The Public Space Challenge was started by the Miami Foundation. The Miami Foundation has been Miami-Dade County's community foundation for over 50 years now. 3 pillars are at the core of the foundation's vision, and that's community investment, civic leadership, and philanthropy. On a day-to-day basis, the Miami Foundation is where people who are passionate about Miami come to work together and address today's community needs in order to ensure a more resilient future for all of us. Urban Impact Lab, and this is Marta, I am with Urban Impact Lab. We are Miami's placemaking and civic innovation hub. Our work is basically the sum of 3 parts: data and policy research that drives civic solutions, creative placemaking that brings community engagement to life, and the incubation of social impact initiatives. That's how we scale impact. Also, Target, who has been investing in communities where their customers and their team members live, work, and play since 1946. They've been a trusted partner and committed supporter for the Public Space Challenge and its winners for over 3 years now. Most importantly, it takes an amazing group of community partners and residents like you in order to make the challenge a success year after year. So what is the Public Space Challenge really all about? First of all, it is an ideas contest. We're talking about any kind of idea that really builds a stronger community, that really brings to light our public space challenge needs, and ideas from people that really care about this community. The challenge is open to everyone. So if you're a resident, if you're a student, if you're a community member that happens to be part of a homeowners association, if you're applying as an organization or a business, if you're a municipal department within a city, or you're even an elected official, it is open to every single individual. The only requirement is that you're addressing, you live in Miami-Dade County and you're addressing a Miami-Dade County need. And finally, it's a $250,000 investment this year in supporting and growing a public space challenge idea. Let's talk a little bit about the why of the challenge, because I think that that's what really is the most valuable piece of information that grounds grounds and determines what ideas move forward. Public spaces, first and foremost, are things that build a stronger and more connected community. They are the places that we get together in good times and maybe even in not so good times. It's where we share experiences and ideas as a community. Public spaces also build resilience, because a stronger and more connected community is the foundation for resilience. It's also where things like physical resilience are also built. We're thinking here about design and innovation that helps us deal with things like climate change related issues, flooding and increased heat, and the kind of problems that Miami-Dade County is facing in the long run. For many of us, improving public spaces means thinking about, and sometimes for the first time, it's thinking about all of the different and unique things that people experience in a place. It's how improvements would benefit all of the diverse members of our neighborhoods. And that means that just by coming together to make these improvements, we're already building a stronger and more connected, resilient community. So what's the result of that? We become better able to advocate and find solutions to some of our shared needs and concerns when we go through the process of addressing these public space issues. In essence, we basically become more civically engaged. And that's where this becomes really interesting, because the more civically engaged we are, the stronger and more connected our community becomes. The stronger our communities are, the better we get at being civically engaged. It's this cycle that the Miami Foundation, through the Public Space Challenge, really believes in supporting and building. But the best part is that improving public spaces doesn't require a design or architecture degree. You don't need to be an engineer or even a scientist. All you need to do is understand what your community needs. It's basically like the team behind Biscayne Green, who understood that the growing downtown Miami neighborhood really needed more people space, where neighbors could get to know each other, maybe have some barbecue, listen to an impromptu music jam, or even have a doggy brunch. Although it's nearby, Bayfront Park isn't always the ideal destination for these activities. But the center parking lots along Biscayne Boulevard looked really appealing. So they converted those into public people spaces, into lots where people could come together for an evening or for an afternoon and really get to know each other and build community. Maybe what you care about is plants and animals in your neighborhood, like Danielle Bender, who had previously learned about the important roles that bees play in every natural system. And she thought it was important for others to know this as well. So she created public hives, and that helps support a thriving bee population. It's open on a regular basis so that anybody from the general public can come and learn and experience bees and beekeeping. Some of you care very deeply about the quality of life of others in your community, just like Sabrina Cohen. That's why she created Sabrina's Adaptive Beach, so that everybody, especially residents that have issues with moving around, walking and things like that, could enjoy one of Miami's most spectacular public spaces. And also, those ideas start really right here in webinars like these and by attending challenge workshops, where we hash out your ideas, we answer questions, and we dig deeper into what we can all do together to make public spaces better for everyone. So the 2019 challenge is really focused on mobility and transportation. How we can make moving around Miami more enjoyable, safer, fun, and easier. So when we think of public spaces, we think of parks and green spaces. We think of places where we get physical activity, Maybe we think of places where we go as a family or as a group for a picnic. We think about public plazas where we go walking and shopping. Maybe some of you think about libraries and other civic buildings. Of course, there's always the beach in a place like Miami-Dade County. And the goal with all of these wonderful and lovely public spaces is really, and it's kind of like a benchmark global goal, to have a great public space like the beach, like the library, like a great park within a 5 to 10 minute walking distance of every Miami resident. But the question is, how do we get there? This year, that's the question that the foundation is digging into. We want you to think of the connective tissue between all of those public places that you really love, and how anyone from 8 years old to 80 years old of all abilities can get to those amazing public spaces. We're challenging you to think of streets and sidewalks and bus stops, train stations. We're asking you to think of bikeways and even just walking trails within your community. What's the why behind that? Well, first and foremost, every single one of those spaces are public spaces themselves. The street and the sidewalk is all public space, any of the walking trails and bike paths. But also, more to the point, building a great city with amazing parks and plazas and libraries and all of those other public destinations also means being able to get there easily, safely, and enjoyably. So this year, we're kind of throwing it back to the 19th century. So in the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, it's not about the destination, it's all about the journey. So let's talk about the journey, and let's start with walking. What does a great walk look and feel like? Is there shade? Does it feel safe? Is it beautiful? Is it well lit? Is there something kind of visually appealing? Do we know where we're going? Is there signage that really clearly points out which way we're supposed to go? And is there seating so that when we get tired or we need a break, we can just take a quick pause and the seating is comfortable and still looks out to something interesting? And what about biking? Biking and scooting in Miami-Dade County is really a big issue. What is that experience like? And more importantly, what should the collective experience we're all having when we're biking be like? First of all, is it safe? Do we have storage for bikes so that they are protected, particularly in a place that's as rainy as Miami-Dade County? Do we have little things built into the city that make it easier for us to be able to take our bike from that last mile, first mile thing when, maybe we're taking the train and we just need that last little piece of our trip, and little pieces of infrastructure make it easier for us to move our bike, bring our bike with us. And of course, the scooters, how do we make sure that everybody that's riding a scooter, is interested in a scooter, is doing so safely and we're all sharing the space? What about transit? How do we improve our transit experience? What can our bus stops look like? Are they shaded? Are they interesting? Do we have enough information at our bus stops to make the experience feel really reliable and we understand what's going on, so we don't feel confused? And also, thinking of buses themselves and trains, those are moving public spaces. What is the experience like on a bus that would make us feel like we kind of want to dance and sing? It just feels like an enjoyable experience. Of course, we're in Miami, and driving frames many of our experiences. And that might not be ideal, but we really feel that we can still figure out ways to make sure that cars contribute to a better community. So let's talk about parking lots. How can we leverage something that's built for cars, but in a more creative and an adaptive way to add real value to communities and help anybody just get more activity and be more mobile? What about other ways that we can help use the infrastructure we've already built around cars to make sure that our community is a bit more resilient? Now, with that last example that we have on the screen, we're looking at a full solar array over a parking lot, and that's clearly beyond the scope of a $250,000 grant. That's a much more it's a much bigger project. But the point that we're trying to dive into is, and what the Public Space Challenge will invest in, is what are the steps that we need to start taking to get here? Because if we don't take those steps now, then when? And so the Public Space Challenge is really a great tool to seed the kind of innovations, the kind of ideas, and the kind of actions that will lead to these overall changes that sometimes might be big infrastructure changes. For now, though, I'm going to pass it over to Chelsea at the Miami Foundation, and she's going to chat about how to submit your ideas. In the meantime, if you have questions, make sure to throw it up on the chat, and we will answer everything that comes through.
Thank you, Martha. Hi, everyone. This is Chelsea at the Miami Foundation. So yeah, I'm just going to take a couple minutes to walk through publicspacechallenge.org to make sure everyone's aware of how best to submit their ideas. So if you go to publicspacechallenge.org, and we have a screenshot here of the main page. So essentially on the first page, you'll see the map that we have laid out of the county. And so you can already see, if you go onto the site, you can see ideas that have already been submitted throughout the county. So it's kind of a nice reference that you can have to kind of look through other ideas that have been submitted for this year. And then the other option is that if you go to, I think it is listed under past site winners, on the website, you can go and look back through previous years. So this goes back all the way to 2013. So you can kind of see just in general the hundreds of ideas that have been submitted to through the program through the various years. So yeah, that's kind of helpful to reference. As far as actually submitting your idea, if you look to the bottom left of the screen of the map, it says add an idea. So basically you can just click there, and then it'll pop up with a couple questions. It'll prompt you to respond. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so essentially you can zoom in on the map and pick your location. And so we're looking for a very specified location. So if you can kind of narrow it down to like a street or an intersection, that'll be easiest for us to kind of map it out and know exactly what you're talking about. And then from there, okay, so if you click add an idea and then look to the pop-up boxes that come up. So essentially we're just asking you three things: the title of your project, the idea, just a basic idea, just a few sentences or maybe a paragraph of what the idea that you have in mind for how you want to improve your neighborhood or the space you're thinking of, and why, you know, essentially within your community, what could your idea do to help improve public spaces and mobility? And so then the next prompt will give you 4 different category options. So it's walking, biking, streets and sidewalks, and public transit. So just click one of those, and it helps us kind of filter and narrow down just to make sure that, you know, we're hitting all the areas and that it's very relevant to this year's theme of mobility. And then going down, so if you do have a location or an address that you can put in, that helps us also narrow down just to kind of know exactly what you're talking about. And then it's also helpful if you potentially have seen in the past other, images or an article or anything related to a similar project that you're looking to complete. Just share that with us so you can upload an image or the link to the website or article so we can reference that as well. And then, yeah, so we just need to know a little bit about you. So your name or the organization that you work with, your email and your phone number, and then it'll post to the map. Oh, yeah, and so just to clarify, so your email, your contact information, so your email and your phone number will not be shared publicly. So the only thing that's shown with your idea will be your name and the name of your organization. And so if you click post to the map, it'll show up with all the rest of the ideas. And then so also if you go to the workshops and resources page, that will list, I think currently all we have is today's webinar, but we'll, to be coming soon, we'll upload all of the dates and locations for the workshops. Okay, yeah, and so just as a reminder, so the submission deadline is coming up in just a few weeks. So May 16th at midnight is the deadline. And then July 19th, we'll be announcing all of the finalists, and then we'll make the final winners announcement September 17th.
So if you have any questions or you'd like to contact anybody, Chelsea's email is on the screen right now, but we'll call it out very quickly. It's C. Clark. So it's basically lark@miamifoundation.org. And you can always email us at Urban Impact Lab, impact@urbanimpactlab.com. And we're happy to answer questions and help you through the submission process or the idea creation process. And just basically, as a reminder, the challenge does close out May 16th, but we're open for questions, and we'll have a number of workshops coming up in the next few weeks where we would, basically take pen to paper and help workshop your ideas. So at this point, we're going to chat about questions.
Hi, everyone. So the first question is coming in from Marley, and she'd like to know, why was there a change to focus just on urban mobility this year? And is there an opportunity for non-urban mobility projects?
Hi, Marley. So the reason to focus on urban mobility projects is essentially over the last few years, we've Public Space Challenge has grown, but there are some areas that are really key issues in our community that could benefit from very direct attention. So things like transportation and mobility, it's often overlooked that streets and sidewalks are in fact public spaces. So by honing in on the idea of, on the theme, we're really elevating the amount of power that our community, our residents have in addressing these issues, and also building momentum towards the changes that are necessary to make sure that our community is more vibrant and resilient in the future. It's also something that is, it's a new thing this year that's being tried out, and so we'll learn from it and see how it goes.
We have another question from Juan. He has an idea to do a project in down a canal near his house. Is a Blueway an option as well?
Yes, Blueways are an option. If you are thinking about how you would submit that, there are, let's see. In the submission process, you might need to put that under maybe like streets or sidewalks. The category would just go under streets or sidewalks. There's not a specific category for Blueways, but point is well taken. We are in Miami, and it's a viable transportation option.
So Josie would love to know, how much money can she win for her idea?
Good question. So in the past years, it really varies. On the low end, ideas that either simple ideas or perhaps they already have some momentum. It's something that somebody's been working on and they just need a little bit extra funding. Will sometimes get awarded, at the low end, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000. On the high end, the ideas kind of have reached $15,000, $20,000, even up to $25,000. This year, what will likely happen is that there will be fewer ideas selected and a bit more money and resources allocated to each idea. So think within more or less those parameters. We'll have a little bit more flexibility with funding this year, but we also can't determine the exact allocation until we see all of the ideas and what the needs are with those, with the variety of ideas. And we are looking county-wide at ideas. So there might be a small idea in downtown that can be done rather inexpensively, and a more expensive idea somewhere else in the county that would require more resources.
So we have another question from Carlos, and he's curious. Well, he has two questions. The first is that he submitted an idea for an empty lot last year. So is he to understand that he's not able to do that again this year? And then just to clarify, if he is selected as a winner this year, what exactly does he have to do?
Okay, so the empty lot idea, again, if it's focused on anything around mobility and transportation, it definitely would work. If the idea was to turn an empty parking lot into, let's say, a urban farm, that wouldn't quite work this year. But if it really fits the narrative and the concept of making moving around more enjoyable, safer, and easier, then it fits. The second question is, what would you have to do? Well, anybody that, so the idea submission period closes off on May 16th. From there, the foundation will select a series of finalists. So there'll be a number of finalists that will then be given the opportunity to submit a full proposal. So if you're selected right after, after May 16th as a finalist, it's your responsibility to submit the full proposal under the impression that you would likely be the responsible party to implement your idea. So you would be the one that will take it from a concept phase all the way to implementation. Of course, I want to mention that the support will be there. Technical assistance will be there to help you through the process and help you figure out what you need to do, who you need to talk to, and help you brainstorm any challenges that need to be addressed. But it is your responsibility to see the project through.
We've had another question that just came in. Is one individual or one entry allowed per submitter, or can the submitter submit more than one idea?
Submitters are welcome to submit more than one idea. There isn't a limit on the number actually of ideas that you can submit. I would like to mention that if there is a submitter that has 20 ideas throughout Miami-Dade County, it becomes very difficult for the folks that are selecting finalists to understand what that individual's priority might be, what they're able to implement. So I would suggest maybe a few ideas, but perhaps not every single idea that comes to mind, because it'll help ensure that one of your ideas rises to the top.
And the last question, this is the last question that we have in our queue so far. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to send them in the chat. But our last question for now comes from Asha, and she's curious, how many winning ideas will be selected this year?
Tough question. The reason that it's difficult is because it really depends on the type of ideas, and then it depends on the amount of resources that are necessary. So when the foundation begins to look through the ideas and select the finalists, there's a lot of care given to the scale of the idea. Is it a one-day event? Is it a permanent infrastructure project? Is it like is it a month-long thing? Does it cost a few dollars to implement, or is it a significant expense? Are there partners that are articulated in the initial submission that seem like perhaps there'll be some cost sharing? So there's so much to take into account before we select the final number of ideas. There were about 22 winning ideas in 2018, and we expect a bit less this year. So, good rule of thumb is maybe in the 15 ballpark.
So we have a question from Isabel. Her first question is, what is the timeline for implementation? And then her next question is, does a budget need to be submitted now? Or if you are a finalist, will it need to be submitted then?
Okay, so the timeline for implementation begins when you would be selected as a winner. The winners are announced in October. So the timeline for implementation would be a year from the time that you are selected as a winner. So roughly October 2019 to October 2020 is your implementation window. Of course, again, taking into account there's a number of different ideas, and there are things to take into account with each idea. But that's roughly speaking, it's a 12-month window. Your second question around submitting a budget, no, you do not need to submit a budget in this initial phase. But if you are selected as a finalist, then there is the expectation that you will submit a budget. And I should mention, we will work with you. There will be a team of people that have done this in the past and will work with you to prepare the budget documents. You'll get some help from the finalist period. Do we have any other questions?
So we have a question from Daniel. His question is, over the past years, what percentage of past winners have gotten their ideas done? And if there are any examples of winners where we can go and see their work.
Okay. Hang on one second. So about 70% of ideas have been completed or implemented. And yes, there are a number of projects that that you can go and see is sort of implemented. The ones that'll come to mind right now, the disc golf course that was installed at the Homestead Air Force Park. Actually, there's quite a few. I'm going to forget some as I rattle these off. One of the examples that we use through the presentation, Sabrina Cohen still does her adaptive beach, and I believe she does it on a monthly basis. So it's installed on a monthly basis. But there are a number of ideas that you could still visit. I think maybe that would be a good piece of information to provide in the FAQ on the site. We'll look into see if we can do that.
Any last call for questions? We have a question from Susan. Her question is, do I need to get permission or access to the area first before I submit my idea?
Good question. It's generally a good idea to have a sense of what it might require to get permission. You don't need to have a permit in order to submit idea, but it could be a really powerful statement to include in your initial submission that you've spoken to either the managing, municipal department that manages the space, or the owner, whoever controls the space. That would make it a lot easier for you through the finalist period, and then definitely in an implementation. It also gives you a sense of whether the idea can be done in the first place or not. So it's definitely a good idea to reach out. But again, not a requirement to get your idea on the map.
So that is the end of our question queue. Thank you so much to everyone that joins, and thanks again to Target for supporting this year's Public Space Challenge. As the presentation said, we'll be hosting a number of workshops in the community in the upcoming days, so check out publicsspacechallenge.org to see where those locations are and the dates. We'd love to see you out there. Looking forward to seeing all of your great ideas. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.
Yes, and thank you. And this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the website as well. You can review it or share with others that maybe perhaps weren't able to make it today. And thank you.